Elon Musk left speechless seeing his black son choose Mendiga and Millonario like mom. The headlines scream from every gossip site and news app: wild, unbelievable, and impossible to ignore. Richard Conway, billionaire tycoon, titan of tech and wealth, was reportedly speechless. Why? Because his only son, James, had fallen for Aisha, a woman unlike anyone Richard had ever imagined in his polished world. Aisha wasn't just different. She was the daughter of a woman who had once been homeless. A former Mendiga who clawed her way back from the streets with grit so fierce it left you breathless. Richard sat in his sleek office, the city skyline glittering behind him like an endless string of stars. But inside, his chest tightened. The clatter of his expensive coffee cup hitting the saucer echoed sharply in the silence. A storm was brewing, not outside, inside his mind. James had asked him to meet at that coffee shop downtown, the one buzzing with the noisy chatter of there she was, Aisha, fierce eyes that sparkled with fierce determination. Her smile was small, shy, but carried a strength that pulled at him despite every warning bell going off inside his head. Meanwhile, James looked calm, a stark contrast to his father's racing heart. Watching them together felt like watching two worlds collide. Whispers floated from nearby tables, curious, judgmental, amazed. "Is that really his son?" someone muttered. Another voice cut through, sharp and cold. "Who is she to him?" Richard's jaw clenched hard. He hated it. This woman, this reality, this crack in his picture-perfect life. But more than hate, fear gripped him. Fear that everything he built could crumble, that he'd lose James to a life he couldn't buy, control, or even understand. The son he raised believing money was the key to happiness, now slipping into a world where love didn't wear a price tag. As he sat there, the truth was a knife twisting inside him. Aisha spoke quietly about her mother's struggle, nights on cold streets, mornings without a home, a story so raw it made Richard's carefully constructed walls start to crack. He could feel the weight of his judgments and insecurities pressing down, suffocating. Was his money really all that mattered? Could love exist without privilege? Could he open his heart and let go of his fears? Suddenly, his phone buzzed sharply. A message popped up, a family secret long buried, ready to shatter everything Richard believed about his own bloodline. The kind of secret that threatens to explode the perfect illusion of power and control. His hand shook as he stared at the screen. Around him, the coffee shop's hum faded into a distant buzz. His breath hitched. Would he protect his image or choose his son? Could he risk everything on love? On truth? The choice waiting at the edge of his world was terrifying. The phone rang. The call was from a number he hadn't seen in years. His heart thundered. He pressed answer, and silence. A voice whispered on the other end, cold and urgent. "You don't know what's coming, Richard, but you will. Soon." He leaned back, mind racing. Can he face the truth without breaking? Or will the secrets drag him under? Leaving his family and himself, shattered beyond repair. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without notice. Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, drop a powerful like that really helps me with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. The silence on the other end of the line felt like an anvil crashing down. Richard's heart raced, pumping icy fear through his veins. That voice, who could it be? The buzzing cafe faded completely, swallowed by the tension that hung thick in the air. He couldn't breathe. Hello? Who is this? He managed to choke out, desperation rising in his throat. You have to listen. They're coming for you, Richard. They'll destroy everything. Richard's mind reeled, thoughts spiraling as he glanced over at James and Aisha. They sat together, heads huddled close. Aisha's laughter bright against the murmur of the cafe. How could he protect his son from whatever storm was brewing? What do you mean? Who? He barked, gripping the phone tightly. The voice lowered, trembling. You don't understand your own past. It's alive, and it's angry. A sudden crash made Richard jump. A nearby table had collapsed, spilling coffee and pastries everywhere. The clatter drew eyes, and whispers slithered through the crowd. Richard felt the weight of their judgment. Panic swelled in his chest. What are you talking about? He pressed, shaking now. His phone slipped slightly from his grip. Your family, not who you think they are, not who you are, the voice hissed, urgency intensifying. You need to find out before it's too late. Richard snapped back to the present. He could feel sweat beading on his brow. Suddenly, Aisha looked up, her fierce eyes locking onto his, slicing through his haze. It was as if she sensed his distress. Are you okay? She asked, concern pouring from her voice, a lifeline amidst the chaos. Before he could respond, the phone went dead, its finality echoing in his mind. He stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then, the abrupt chiming of the cafe door pulled his attention. To his shock, in walked a tall man with an unsettling grin, an aura of dark confidence surrounding him. Richard's stomach dropped. Something in that man's stare sent a chill down his spine. He locked eyes with Aisha, who was now gaping at the new arrival, something shifting in her expression. She stood slowly, confusion battling concern. What's wrong? She whispered, glancing between Richard and the intruder. Stay here, both of you, he ordered, but it came out weak and shaky. The man approached, his strides deliberate, confident. Richard Conway, he announced, as if they were already friends. The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Who are you? Richard demanded, every muscle in his body tensing up. I'm here to discuss family matters. Your family matters, the man said, his tone taunting. Get away from us! James had finally come to. His youthful face mirrored his father's growing dread. Oh, but you should hear what I have to say. It might change everything. The man leaned in closer, lowering his voice. Your mother, She wasn't who you thought. Richard felt the air thicken with implications. Aisha's face turned pale, her breath hitching. The whispers in the cafe rose again, this time sharper, more frantic. Chattering mouths asking what was happening, each broad with intrigue and concern. "What do you mean?" Richard barely whispered, his voice tight with fear. The man smiled wider, a sinister gleam in his eye. "Let's just say, you're not just a man of wealth, Richard. You're part of a legacy," he said, and Richard could only watch, frozen in fear, as the man's next words struck like a thunderbolt. "Your mother was never who she claimed to be. You are not who you think you are." Everything inside Richard shattered. His mind went blank. The ground beneath him felt like quicksand. Secrets buried deep began to claw their way to the surface, ready to uproot his entire existence. What legacy? What truth? As his world tilted on its axis, the sky around them darkened. What had started as a simple meeting in a cozy cafe was spiraling into chaos, with shadows growing darker nearby. "Richard!" Aisha's voice was thick with shock as she moved closer. But he couldn't speak. His heart thudded painfully as the world around him blurred. The choice before him wasn't just about acceptance. It was about survival. And suddenly, the price of truth felt impossibly high. Richard leaned back, struggling to catch his breath. The silence on the other end of the line felt like a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. His heart raced as he tried to comprehend the cold whisper that echoed around him. "What's coming? What does that mean?" He glanced at James and Aisha. They laughed softly, their heads bent close together, momentarily oblivious to the turbulence raging in Richard's mind. But now, the coffee shop buzz transformed into an unbearable drone, a background noise to the pounding in his ears. He felt the walls of his perfect life closing in, tightening around him. Then it happened. A loud crash reverberated through the air. A barista dropped the tray, shattering the fragile silence like glass. Conversations halted. Every head turned. Richard jerked upright, adrenaline kicking in as he scanned the room. A woman stumbled into view. She was disheveled, eyes wild and frantic. In one hand, she clutched a piece of crumpled paper, her other arm gesturing wildly, as if trying to bring attention to something urgent. "Help! Somebody! Please!" she shouted. The urgency in her voice jolted Richard. The coffee shop became a whirlwind of whispers and nervous glances. "Is she okay?" someone asked. "What's happening?" echoed another. Richard's heart raced, not just from the chaos, but from a sinister possibility forming in his gut. The woman's eyes locked onto Richard. "You have to listen." "It's about the boy," she yelled, pointing directly at James. It was impossible. Could she know anything about his son? Richard's mind spiraled as fear began to pulsate through him. "Get away from him!" Richard barked, his voice booming over the crowd. Panic swelled within him as he stood, protective instinct kicking in. James looked up, confusion flooding his face. "Dad?" The woman ignored Richard's warning, stumbling closer. "It's not what you think. You don't know the truth." Her voice wavered, spitting out words like they were stones. "He's in danger. You have to trust me." Richard's blood ran cold as her words struck him. Images of lost control, family betrayal, and secrets long buried surged through his mind. He shook his head, defiance oiling inside him. "Who are you? What do you know?" he demanded. In that moment, something flickered in the woman's gaze. Remorse or desperation? Richard couldn't tell. She glanced nervously at James, then back at Richard. "You think you know everything about your son, but he's not who you think he is." The murmurs in the coffee shop became a storm of emotions, questions, gasps, uncertainty. Richard felt the weight of each voice pressing on him. He gripped the back of a chair, steadying himself. "What the hell do you mean?" His voice barely concealed the tremor that threatened to escape. "Please, just look at this." She thrust the paper forward, desperation etched across her face. Richard's instinct screamed at him to refuse, to turn and protect his son from the chaos surrounding them. But he was drawn in. Something about her energy felt undeniable. Taking cautious steps forward, his eyes darted between James and the woman. The tension crackled in the air as she revealed the paper. This is about his mother. And you, Richard, you're not who you think you are either. You're connected to this. Time seemed to freeze. The words hung heavy, loaded with a weight he never expected. Richard stared at the paper, fear gripping him tight. What truth could possibly be hidden here? The world around them blurred, each person in the cafe a distant ghost. Richard felt the ground shift. Everything he'd built, every protective instinct for James, began to crumble like a sandcastle before a tidal wave. Silently, he reached for the crumpled paper, heart in his throat. What revelation awaited him? What lies had he been living? And in that moment, the fabric of their lives warped, threatening to unravel entirely. Richard hesitated, the cacophony of the coffee shop fading into a dull roar. The crumpled paper trembled in his grasp. He didn't want to believe this woman. He didn't want to see what lay beneath his carefully constructed life. "What truth?" he urged, his voice hoarse with desperation. The woman's eyes widened, urgency spilling from her every word. "There are things you don't know, things that could rip your family apart." James shifted closer to Aisha, anxiety etched on his young face. "Please, just," Richard began. But his thoughts were interrupted. Suddenly, the cafe doors swung open, violently, slamming against the wall. Everyone turned to look, hearts fluttering with unease. A group of men burst in, faces hardened, eyes scanning the crowd. Richard's breath caught in his throat. Danger dripped from their presence like a storm cloud. Richard's instincts kicked in. "Get down!" he shouted, pushing James and Aisha behind him. The tension snapped taut. As patrons shifted nervously, whispers buzzing like bees. "What the hell is this?" he barked, stepping forward, his heart racing. The lead man, tall with a menacing smirk, pointed a finger straight at Richard. "You, Richard Conway." "Esta, Nieko." "We need to talk," he snarled, voice low and threatening. "About what?" Richard could barely manage to spit out. His mind spun with this new threat, the woman's words still echoing in his head. "About your family. All those secrets you buried. Time to pay the price," the man continued, eyes glinting like broken glass. Before Richard could react, the woman screamed, "No, you can't!" But it was too late. The lead man lunged forward, quick as a dart. There was a sudden explosion of chaos. Chairs toppled. A scream pierced the air, and the coffee shop erupted into panic as the man grabbed Richard by the collar, jerking him nearer. "Enough games. You need to understand," he hissed, his breath hot against Richard's face. Richard struggled, adrenaline flooding his veins. "Get your hands off of me!" But the man held firm, eyes flashing with a strange certainty. Then, like a thunderclap, the woman stepped closer, determination written across her features. "Stop! You don't know his family. You're connected to them too." Richard's heart raced again. What did she mean? The man froze, confusion flickering across his face before he laughed, a dark, guttural sound. "Let me tell you something, sweetheart. Richard's mother wasn't just a nobody. She was meant to lead." His voice trailed off, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavily in the air. "What?" Richard felt a rush of disbelief. "Yes, and you," she interrupted, pointing a trembling finger at the man. "You're lying. You can't just intimidate him like this." The man's expression twisted into something cold and calculating. "Don't you get it? This isn't just about Richard. Your son." He pointed to James, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent shivers down Richard's spine. "He's the key to everything." Panic erupted in Richard's chest. "What do you mean? What do you know about my son?" But the man only grinned wider, savoring the uncertainty like a predator. "He's part of a legacy that you've been blind to, a fate you can't avoid." Everything crashed around Richard. His world turned upside down. The coffee shop, the people, the laughter, they all blurred and faded. How could this be? Another crash echoed, a window shattering as someone outside screamed. Richard's heart thumped in his chest, fear igniting within him. "Get away from my family!" he shouted, but his voice was lost in the growing chaos. Suddenly, the woman screamed again, panic ringing her voice. "You need to run! They're here for all of you!" The room spun, eyes wide with fear. Richard was caught between the threat of the man and the weight of the woman's revelation. Whispers exploded in his mind. Family ties? Legacy? The man was slowly retreating, still smirking, but danger lingered in his eyes. "We'll be watching, Richard. The truth will come out. You just wait," he warned, turning as his equally menacing companions fell into step behind him. Richard stood frozen, breathless and shocked. The woman's warning echoed in his head. "He's not who you think he is." "Dad?" James's voice cut through the haze, pulling falteringly at Richard's heart. And in that instant, something deep within Richard snapped. Was he really ready to learn the truth? To confront the past and the shadows lurking around his family? The cafe erupted into a mad dash. All he could think was, what legacy? What truth? It felt like a curse closing in. He wasn't sure if he could face whatever lay ahead, but there was no turning back now. Richard leaned back, feeling the weight of years pressing down, the phone still buzzing in his hand. The hushed atmosphere of the coffee shop felt thick, almost suffocating. Aisha was talking about hopes and futures, her lips moving passionately, but his mind was lost in a whirlwind. He wanted to focus on her, to engage, but the cold voice on the end of the line echoed, urgent and foreboding. "Richard," it whispered again, drawing him deeper into a sea of confusion. Suddenly, the world faded away. He could almost hear his heart beating in his ears, trapped between instinct and obligation. All around him, the murmurs of the coffee shop blurred into an indistinct hum. James noticed. He turned, eyes flicking to his father. "Dad, you okay?" Concern laced his voice, piercing through the fog. Before Richard could respond, the air around them erupted in chaos. A deafening crash shattered the cafe's buzz. Glass shattered, chairs clattered, and a scream pierced the atmosphere. The front window exploded inward, and a masked figure barged in, waving something fierce and dark. Time stood still. Richard's breath hitched. Fear pierced through him like ice. In an instant, he felt something shift deep within. An instinct for protection taking over. "Get down!" Richard shouted, instinctively moving closer to James and Aisha. Tables tipped as people yanked themselves away from the chaos. It felt surreal. Scenes they'd only ever seen in movies. Aisha's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly grabbed James's arm, pulling him away from the danger. Richard felt a flicker of admiration for her bravery, even as he pushed them both to the ground. "Stay low!" he barked, his authoritative tone returning as adrenaline surged through him. But amid the panic, his own thoughts twisted with confusion. Why was this happening? Who was this person? It all felt so personal, so targeted, and then it hit him. Like a thunderbolt, the rumors swirling in the back of his mind, the ones about his father's past, secrets that should have stayed buried. Had they come to claim him? The intruder's voice rang out, harsh and commanding. "I'm looking for Richard Conway. You can't hide." His words ricocheted off the walls, sending another wave of panic rippling through the crowd. Richard's heart raced. Was this about his family? His wealth? All the lies he had told himself and everyone else, now crashing down like that broken glass? "Dad!" James's voice, edged with fear, jolted him back. The masked figure turned, head darting like a predator. Richard's body instinctively tensed. He was about to move, to shield his son, but then something unexpected happened. Aisha stepped forward, her voice strong, cutting through the haze of terror. "Wait!" she called out, even though the danger loomed closer. "You're mistaken! This isn't the way!" Richard's breath caught. He didn't understand. Why was she stepping up, facing a threat that could spell disaster? "Stop!" she insisted, eyes fierce and unwavering. "You don't have to do this!" But before Richard could fully process her bravery, the masked figure took a step back. The atmosphere shifted, transforming fear into something else, an unexpected tension, a new mystery. "You think you can protect him?" the intruder spat, voice dripping with venom. "You know nothing about his past. You don't know who you're standing with." At that moment, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge of a knife. Richard's heart hammered painfully in his chest, and he suddenly remembered the ominous call, the chilling warning. "Who are you?" Richard demanded, feeling a mix of defiance and desperation. But the answer came wrapped in shadows, digging deeper than he ever expected. The intruder laughed, a sound both mocking and hollow. "Let's just say, there are things about your family you've yet to unravel. Secrets that run deeper than you can imagine," he said, voice low and eerie. Richard's mind raced. What truth was lurking there, just behind his carefully curated life? And then, as sudden as it began, the moment collapsed under the weight of horrifying uncertainty, leaving Richard and everyone else hanging on a precipice of chaos, questions burning hot in the pit of their guts. As the masked figure stepped closer, Richard faced the truth. Everything was about to change. The phone call hung heavy in the air. Richard's heart pounded, the moment stretching like elastic, ready to snap. The silence gnawed at him, and then a voice, a familiar voice he thought he'd never hear again, broke through the stillness. "Richard, I've been waiting for this day." Richard's breath hitched. He shut his eyes, heart racing. "Who is this?" he forced out, a mix of dread and recognition gripping him. "Your past catching up to you," the voice replied, a low, mocking tone. "You thought you could bury the truth forever? I'm here to remind you, it will find you." And just like that, the coffee shop faded away. The sounds of clinking cups and idle chatter swallowed by a roaring tide of memories. Richard's mind raced, flickering through snapshots of a life he'd hidden, a life he'd tried to erase. An accident, a name whispered in the dark, a family torn apart, his family. But all those thoughts were eclipsed by the most frightening realization. "Is it you?" His voice quivered, each syllable like thunder in the fragile air. "Is it really you? How could you?" "Because I had no choice," she spat back, her voice hard like steel. "You left me to rot, Richard, but now it's time to pay." Around him, the coffee shop buzzed obliviously, unaware of the storm brewing at Richard's table. Aisha looked up, confusion clouding her fierce eyes. She sensed the shift, the tension rising like a tide. James, too, glanced between them, concern etching his youthful features. The world had turned upside down. "Who are you talking to?" James asked, his voice steady, though Richard could hear the panic simmering beneath. Richard's mind spun. His carefully curated world splintered into 1,000 pieces. Just a business call," he managed, though the words felt inadequate, stretched beyond truth. The voice on the line sneered. "Oh, James should know, shouldn't he? After all, he's part of this mess too." Richard's heart dropped to his gut. A cold sweat crept up his spine. "What are you saying?" he breathed. But he already knew. He could feel it, the ground beneath him crumbling. Aisha leaned closer, tension crackling in the air. "You're scaring me, Richard," she said softly, her tone turning from confusion to worry. And then the words burst forth before he could stop them. "Aisha, my family might not be what you think." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" But the voice on the other end wasn't finished. "You're sitting next to a ticking time bomb, Richard. He deserves to know. They both deserve to know." Richard's heart raced, panic clawing at his throat. "Stop! Just stop!" But it was too late. The words were out there. A wild beast he couldn't cage. Aisha's gaze hardened, seeking answers in Richard's eyes. "What are you hiding? What kind of family secret?" The voice on the phone chuckled darkly. "Let's just say James isn't the only heir in this story, and someone else is coming to claim what's theirs." Richard's world swayed, a dizzying high-wire act come crashing down. The coffee shop fell silent. All eyes turned toward him. Curiosity morphing into a desperate hunger for truth. Richard's breath quickened. Would he expose everything, or would he bury it deeper, sacrificing the connections that mattered most? From across the room, a nearby table erupted, whispers darting like arrows. "This can't be happening," someone muttered, the tension palpable. Richard looked at James and Aisha, their eyes searching. What kind of father would he be if he allowed this darkness to loom over them? "Richard?" James' voice broke through the haze, steady yet quaking. "What is going on?" Richard gripped the phone tightly, sweat pooling in the palms of his hands. The truth or the lie? Which would he protect? Richard's heart raced as the silence hung heavy in the air. The voice on the other end of the line felt like ice sliding down his spine. "You don't know what's coming, Richard, but you will soon." Panic surged through him, grabbing hold with claw-like fingers. What did this mean? He shook his head as if that could shake off the dread. Aisha's gaze was questioning, and James wore an expression of calm that made Richard's insides twist. He couldn't hold on to the moment any longer, not with this shadow lurking over him. "I need to take this," Richard muttered, but his voice fell flat. He moved away, hands trembling like leaves in a storm, trying to make sense of the chaos inside him. The worst was yet to come. Suddenly, the coffee shop door swung open with a bang. Heads turned, whispers flowed, and an unexpected figure stepped in. Emma, his estranged sister. Her eyes locked onto him, wild and frantic. "Richard!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the murmur of disbelief. Richard recoiled. "What are you doing here?" She stormed forward, breathless, panic radiating off her. "You need to listen to me. It's about our father. It's about our family." Her words rushed like water bursting through a dam. "What are you talking about?" Richard said, every syllable coated in confusion and unease. She looked like a ghost come back to haunt him, hair wild and eyes wide. Before he could process what was happening, Emma dropped the bombshell that shattered his world. "He isn't your real father, Richard. I found the birth certificate. You were adopted." She stepped closer, desperation etched in her features. "You have to believe me." The weight of her revelation felt like a punch to the gut. Richard's mind reeled. Adopted? That couldn't be. He remembered every moment with his father, every lesson learned in the name of business, money, success. How could it all be a lie? The coffee shop blurred around him, faces fading into a fog as emotions surged inside him, nearly overwhelming. James had stepped forward too, concern flooding his eyes. Aisha, still seated, looked between them, every bit of this new reality crashing down on her. "Richard, this changes everything. You need to confront the truth," Emma urged, her voice shaking. Richard felt like he was drowning. His own sister was claiming everything he believed was fake. A knife twisted further into him, each word striking harder than the last. He looked back at Aisha, whose expression was a mix of concern and confusion. What was he supposed to say? Could it be true? The world around him began to spin, voices rising up and crashing down like waves. At that moment, Richard's phone buzzed again. Another message, another potential shove into deeper chaos. He felt his hand shake as he glanced down. It was an unknown number. The dread began to bubble up once more. "Richard!" Emma's voice cut through. "You have to make a choice, to face who you really are, to claim what's left of your family." What did that mean for James? For Aisha? A sinking feeling settled in his chest. All the carefully crafted illusions were unraveling before him, threatening to expose him, his past, his identity, his relationship with James. Around him, the coffee shop hummed with life, but for him, time had stopped. The weight of untold secrets pressed down on him like an anchor. He was staring into the abyss of his world, fear clawing at him from every side. Could he even choose who he wanted to be anymore? As Richard stared into the void of uncertainty, the phone buzzed again, demanding his attention. The storm within him was about to break loose. What would this next message unveil? What other truths had been hidden in the shadows? Desperation clawed at his heart like a hungry beast. Richard leaned back, struggling to catch his breath. The silence felt deafening, wrapping around him like a thick fog. The phone in his hand buzzed again, the screen flickering with the same ominous unknown number. His heart raced, sinking with the pulsing uncertainty in his chest. The voice on the other end was still echoing in his mind, an insistent reminder of the truth lurking beneath the surface. Richard. Tank, tank. Emma's voice cut through the haze, pulling him back momentarily. This is important. You need to listen to me. But Richard was lost, torn between the chaos of his reality and the fear of what might come next. He glanced at James and Aisha. Their faces reflected a mix of confusion and fright. He couldn't let them see his fear. Not now. Not ever. Maybe we should just go, Aisha offered softly, her voice trembling with uncertainty. But Richard ignored her. Before anyone could say more, the cafe door slammed open again. This time with a violent force. A tall figure crashed inside, catching everyone's attention. The weight of silence returned, thick and suffocating, as the figure strode forward, an unsettling confidence trailing behind him. Richard's breath caught as recognition dawned. "Luis," he whispered, eyes widening in disbelief. There stood the very man Richard thought he'd left behind. The man responsible for his father's so-called legacy. A face he never thought he'd see again. Luis had an unsettling grin plastered on his face. The air was filled with a sense of dread. "Richard, it's been a long time," Luis exclaimed, his voice dripping with faux warmth. The crowd stared, questions buzzing freely in the air. Richard felt the world narrow down, the chaos blurring out of focus. How could this happen? Fear and rage swirled inside him. "What do you want?" he demanded, but uncertainty lined his voice. Luis stepped toward him, casual but menacing. "I think you know why I'm here. You've been digging. You've been asking questions. That's dangerous." Tension slammed through the room like a whip. Patrons glanced nervously at each other, whispering. Richard could feel their eyes boring into him, judgment creeping in like mist. "Why now?" Richard spat, every word sharp with disdain. "You have no right to show your face here." Luis chuckled, a cold sound that sent shivers down Richard's spine. "Oh, but I do. You see, Richard, your family isn't what you think it is, and neither are you." A deep chill wrapped around Richard's spine. His gut twisted painfully. The cafe felt too small, too constricted. The walls were closing in. Who was this man now? Another shadow from the past. "Leave us alone!" Aisha shouted, suddenly stepping in front of James, a fierce protector. Richard felt a swell of pride mixed with fear. They needed to go. They had to escape this terror. But Luis just smiled wider. "Oh, I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said, cackling with delight, his eyes shimmering with a dark thrill. Not yet. Then, right in front of their eyes, in a bold and shocking move, he pulled out a small device from his pocket and raised it high. "This is about secrecy, Richard, about your family's history. You're all caught up in something much bigger than you can imagine." Before Richard could react, before he could process the implications, Luis pressed a button. In an instant, the lights dimmed, flickering erratically. Panic replaced shock as people began to shout in confusion, scrambling. "Get down!" Richard yelled, instinctively reaching for James and Aisha. But the lights went out completely. The cafe plunged into dark chaos, screams echoing around them, fear wrapping tighter than a vice. Richard's heart raced as he clutched the hand of his son in one hand and Aisha in the other. "Stay close," he shouted, pulling them away from the rising hysteria. But before he could guide them towards the exit, he felt a sharp pain in his side, a quick and brutal stab like fire. "Get off him!" Aisha's voice pierced through the dark. Richard stumbled, looking down at the shadowed figure that had just attacked him. In the chaotic darkness, his world cracked open. "What's happening?" he gasped. And as he struggled to comprehend, another chilling realization crashed over him like a tidal wave. James wasn't just his son. At that moment of chaos, Richard understood the truth. Everything was falling apart. Not just his life. The very fabric of his family was unraveling. As the panic roared around them, a deeper, darker secret rippled beneath the surface, begging to be unearthed. Richard gripped tighter, heart racing, and somewhere amidst the chaos, he felt the unmistakable pull of fate dragging him down. With a jolt of realization, he knew the shadows were closing in. And suddenly, he wasn't just fighting for his life, but for the truth that would shatter everything he had ever believed. Richard leaned back, struggling to catch his breath. The silence felt deafening, wrapping around him like a thick fog. The phone in his hand buzzed again, the screen flickering with the same ominous unknown number. His heart raced, sinking with the pulsing uncertainty in his chest. The voice on the other end was still echoing in his mind, an insistent reminder of the truth lurking beneath the surface. "Richard!" Emma's voice cut through the haze, pulling him back momentarily. "This is important! You need to listen to me!" But Richard was lost, torn between the chaos of his reality and the fear of what might come next. He glanced at James and Aisha. Their faces reflected a mix of confusion and fright. He couldn't let them see his fear. Not now. Not ever. "Maybe we should just go," Aisha offered softly, her voice trembling with uncertainty, but Richard ignored her. Before anyone could say more, the cafe door slammed open again, this time with a violent force. A tall figure crashed inside, catching everyone's attention. The weight of silence returned, thick and suffocating, as the figure strode forward, an unsettling confidence trailing behind him. Richard's breath caught as recognition dawned. "Luis," he whispered, eyes widening in disbelief. There stood the very man Richard thought he'd left behind, the man responsible for his father's so-called legacy. A face he never thought he'd see again. Luis had an unsettling grin plastered on his face. The air was filled with a sense of dread. "Richard, it's been a long time," Luis exclaimed, his voice dripping with faux warmth. The crowd stared, questions buzzing freely in the air. Richard felt the world narrow down, the chaos blurring out of focus. How could this happen? Fear and rage swirled inside him. "What do you want?" he demanded, but uncertainty lined his voice. Luis stepped toward him, casual but menacing. "I think you know why I'm here. You've been digging. You've been asking questions. That's dangerous." Tension slammed through the room like a whip. Patrons glanced nervously at each other, whispering. Richard could feel their eyes boring into him, judgment creeping in like mist. "Why now?" Richard spat, every word sharp with disdain. "You have no right to show your face here." Luis chuckled, a cold sound that sent shivers down Richard's spine. "Oh, but I do. You see, Richard, your family isn't what you think it is, and neither are you." A deep chill wrapped around Richard's spine. His gut twisted painfully. The cafe felt too small, too constricted. The walls were closing in. Who was this man now? Another shadow from the past? "Leave us alone!" Aisha shouted, suddenly stepping in front of James, a fierce protector. Richard felt a swell of pride mixed with fear. They needed to go. They had to escape this terror. But Luis just smiled wider. "Oh, I'm not here to hurt anyone. At least, not yet." Then, right in front of their eyes, in a bold and shocking move, he pulled out a small device from his pocket and raised it high. "This is about secrecy, Richard. About your family's history. You're all caught up in something much bigger than you can imagine." Before Richard could react, before he could process the implications, Luis pressed a button. In an instant, the lights dimmed, flickering erratically. Panic replaced shock as people began to shout in confusion, scrambling. "Get down!" Richard yelled, instinctively reaching for James and Aisha. But before he could guide them towards the exit, he felt a sharp pain in his side, a quick and brutal stab like fire. "Get off him!" Aisha's voice pierced through the dark. Richard stumbled, looking down at the shadowed figure that had just attacked him. In the chaotic darkness, his world cracked open. "What's happening?" he gasped. And as he struggled to comprehend, another chilling realization crashed over him like a tidal wave. As the lights flickered back on, Richard's eyes widened in horror. The figure looming over him wasn't just another enemy, it was Emma. Blood streamed down her arm where she had been cut from his earlier push. Her eyes were wild, fear mingling with something deeper. "I had to. Richard, you're in danger." Confusion flooded Richard as the cafe erupted into chaos. Watching Emma, he felt betrayal laced with a desperate need to protect. "What are you talking about?" he cried. But her gaze shifted, darting around the room, searching. "I couldn't let you face this alone. We need to escape!" Emma screamed, her voice shaking. "What are you hiding?" Richard demanded, shaking his head. "What do you know?" In that moment, everything spiraled. Emma stepped back into the shadows where the light struggled to reach and whispered urgently, "He's not the only one who knows the truth." Richard felt his heart race faster. As she spoke those words, time slowed. The patrons were now all on the floor, chaos reigning. But for Richard and Emma, reality warped. "What truth? What do you mean he's not?" And then, just like that, the lights snapped off again. Richard felt the weight of dread fill the room. A scream shot through the blackness, and the shape of a body tumbled against him, knocking him back. His fear coiled tighter around his heart. "Richard!" Aisha's panicked voice pulled him further into the chaos. "No more secrets!" Emma's voice erupted from the darkness. "I'm living proof. We must tell him." The lights flickered, revealing the chaos in brief, strobe-like flashes. Richard caught sight of Aisha and James, faces drawn tight with fear. He turned back to Emma, who was now frantic, urging him to come closer. "Remember the family tree I showed you?" Emma's eyes blazed with intensity. "Your secrets are our secrets, Richard. But their truth, it binds us more than you imagined." Panic stabbed at Richard. What had she unearthed? As the chaos swirled around them, Louise's laughter echoed darkly through the cafe, a tease filled with menace. "The truth will always come out, Richard. It always does," he jeered. "Emma, stop!" Richard shouted, holding her back. "What did you find out?" Before she could answer, the lights returned in full, revealing a scene of sudden stillness. The other patrons were still, eyes glazed, as if frozen in time. Then Richard's breath caught. Emma's face was ghostly pale. "He's not the only one with secrets," she said in a whisper, the weight of her words settling like a shroud. "You need to know you're not just his son. You're tied to him by blood." Time shattered around Richard, cracking the world into pieces. His grip on everything, family, love, identity, slipped and crashed to the floor. The truth he thought he'd never question hung heavy in the air. What blood-bound ties had he overlooked? As the very foundation of his life crumbled, Richard's entire existence teetered on the edge of a knife. Richard's breath hitched in his throat, a rush of confusion draining the color from his face. Emma had just shattered everything he thought he knew. A cold wave of realization washed over him, twisting his guts tighter than ever. "No, that can't be true," he gasped. But deep down a knot tightened, whispering that the truth might be too heavy to bear. The cafe, once a bustling haven, felt claustrophobic now. Shadows creeping around them like dark tendrils, suffocating his thoughts. He turned to James, who stood frozen, eyes wide with shock. "Dad, what's happening?" "James," Richard began, his voice a low rumble, shaky with fear. But before he could tie together the threads of truth, Louise interrupted with that insidious smile, cutting through the chaos. "Isn't this a lovely family reunion?" he sneered, eyes dancing with malicious delight. "Just wait until the real revelations come out. It's going to be quite the show." Richard felt the tension snap tight. The chaos of the cafe buzzed around them, patrons murmuring, eyes darting nervously. He couldn't let Louise control this moment. "Not now." "Emma, tell me everything," Richard urged, desperation lacing his words. Emma stepped closer, urgency glowing in her eyes. The adoption? It wasn't just about you, Richard. There are ties you never knew existed. More than blood. The legacy you thought was yours. It's far more complicated. Panic surged in Richard's veins. What do you mean? What does that have to do with James? But as she opened her mouth to respond, Louise snickered, stepping into the spotlight of their moment. Your son could be the linchpin, Richard. The key. The heir. But only if you dare to claim the truth. Richard squeezed his eyes shut, trying to block out the impending dread. The laughter in the room became a mocking backdrop to his spiraling chaos. But amidst darkness, Aisha's hand bound Richard's arm, grounding him. We'll figure this out together, she whispered urgently. But even her strength felt tenuous against the weight of revelations. The lights flickered again. More panic surged, people jostling, trying to escape. Stay together, Richard shouted, pulling James and Aisha close. We can't let them scare us. As the tension thundered, Richard felt a spark of rebel defiance ignite deep within him. He turned back to Emma, determination in his voice. What do we need to do? Face it! We must confront Luis and unveil his lies, she urged, eyes burning with hope. Let's end this right now, Richard roared, fueled by emotion, the love he had for his family, overshadowed by the chaos spinning around them. His heart raced. There was no turning back. Luis's smirk faded, his confidence rattled by Richard's resolve. You really want to dig deeper? Be careful what you wish for. It doesn't matter, Richard countered fiercely. If the truth will set us free, then I'll take that risk. The cafe erupted in chaos as the lights flooded back on, casting stark illumination on faces caught in expressions of disbelief. Murmurs cascaded, nervous gleams of excitement sparking amidst the audience. Luis stared, momentarily stripped of his bravado. You think you're ready? He roared, stepping forward, but Richard met him with steely determination. I am ready. I will face whatever darkness exists within my family. Just then, a sudden hush fell over the crowd. A collective heartbeat echoing as they absorbed Richard's fierce proclamation. The stakes felt staggeringly high, but Richard knew he had to protect what mattered most. His family, his legacy, even if it was written in mysteries yet to unravel. The moment hung in the air, thick and electric, pulsing with urgency. Luis smirked again, this time laced with something darker. Then let the games begin, and pray you're ready for the results. Richard's heart, he would face the truth, whatever it was. Hand in hand, they stood together, united. But beneath the resolve, there lingered a tantalizing sense of dread. What really awaited them? As the shadows shifted around them, Richard couldn't shake the feeling. The answers were closer than ever, but they were more dangerous than he ever anticipated. The mystery remained, an echoing whisper on the edge of the night. Now, if you've enjoyed this thrilling conclusion and you want to keep diving into more exclusive tales, you have to subscribe immediately to the channel. Don't miss a second of the wild stories coming up next. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about this ending. I want to hear what you think. And don't wait even a second longer to share this video with a minimum of 5 friends who need to experience this mind-bending conclusion. Your support means everything. Let's keep unraveling these captivating